this thing still fits after all those years. It's been up in the attic. I didn't even think I'd find it. Let's see. Looky there. I thought I gained me some weight, but I'm thinking I'm feeling pretty fit yet. You might be wondering why I got this out of the attic. Tried it on again. Sergeant stripes, look at that. But it happened when I got a couple weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail made out to Mr. Milton Hanna. You see that right there? Okay. At any rate, I got to just read this letter to you real quick because it sure did get me all excited. It's postmarked Washington, D.C., July 30th, 1898. Milton Hanna, Esquire, Mankato, Blue Earth County, Minnesota. It says, Dear Sir, you are hereby notified that by direction of the President and under the provisions of the Act of Congress approved March 3rd, 1863, providing for the presentation of medals of honor to such officers, non-commissioned officers, and privates as have most distinguished themselves in action, a Congressional Medal of Honor has this day been presented to you for most distinguished gallantry in action, the following being a statement of the particular service, and I read, At Nolensville, Tennessee, February 15, 1863, this soldier, then a corporal, Company H, 2nd Minnesota, was one of a detachment of 16 men escorting a wagon train that was attacked by 125 cavalry. After a most heroic defense, the attack was repulsed and the train saved. The medal will be forwarded to you by registered mail as soon as it shall be engraved by Tiffany & Son. Respectfully, P.A. Alger, Secretary of War. Well, when I got this letter a couple weeks ago, I decided to go up and try to see if this old uniform would fit again, and you'll never guess what arrived in the mail today. Well, I'll show it to you later. You might be wondering, how did I, a humble person from Mankato, win the Medal of Honor? Well, I'm one of two individuals from Blue Earth County that actually won the Medal of Honor, and the other man was my sergeant in Company H of the 2nd Minnesota Volunteer Infantry Regiment. His name was Sergeant LaVillo Holmes, and he would eventually end up leading our company. Even though he was a first lieutenant, our captain was pretty busy doing other things, and so he basically took over command of the 2nd Company, of Company H of the 2nd Minnesota. So, let me give you a little background about myself first of all. I was born in 1842 in Ohio to James and Nancy Hanna, and we lived in Ohio. We were a farming family. When I was 11 years old in 1853, we got the itch to go further west, and so we moved out west and we came to what was then Minnesota territory. And we started farming here, and we liked it in Minnesota, but almost immediately our family was marked with the tragedy. My father, James, died 3 years after we arrived in Minnesota territory. And for a while, Ma and I kept up with the farm, but eventually we opened up a dry goods store and a grocery store, and then something happened. In April of 1861, the dastardly rebels opened up on Fort Sumter, and all young men were called to duty, and I had to answer the call. And it was very hard on my mother, but at 19 years old, I went off to fight in the war between the states. And I joined the 2nd Minnesota. The first, I'd already tried to get into the 1st. The 2nd Minnesota was being raised. I got into Company H, and this is one of the few companies that was actually raised right here in Blue Earth County. And on June 22nd, 1861, I was mustered into the service of the Union Army. The 2nd Minnesota was pretty active. We were fighting in the West, and we actually won the first big battle in the West, won by the Union Army, which was the Battle of Mill Springs, Kentucky. And I was involved in the Siege of Corinth, Mississippi, and also the Battle of Murfreesboro, which was pretty much a stalemate, but it was a bloody affair. But the highlight, I would say, I didn't think it was a highlight at the time, but I certainly look back on it as being one of the more interesting parts of my time in the Army, happened on February 15th, 1863. And we were camped near Nolensville, Tennessee, and it was a cold, frosty morning. We had snow and frost the day before, and a little bit of sleet mixed in with it, so we were pretty much miserable and wet, and a bunch of us smelled like wet dogs. And we were all gathered around the campfire to warm up, and all of a sudden we got placed on a detail. 16 of us were told to guard 10 wagons that would be going out to forage for fodder for our mules. We were getting really low on stuff to feed our mules, and so we were supposed to guard the wagons that went out to forage for the fodder. And so we accompanied them, and we were heading south from camp. We went about 3 miles south on the Nolensville Turnpike, and we came to a crossroads, and our officer, and I forget his name offhand right now, but he ordered 4 of us wagons to turn off to the southeast. But as we were about to turn off, all of a sudden a contraband, a black man come running up to us and warned us, the Yankee soldiers, that there was a whole regiment of Confederate cavalry. He said it was the 6th Alabama Cavalry, and they were 500 strong. Well, we, discretion is the better part of valor. We decided to try and steal clear of that since there was only 16 of us. So we turned off on the turnpike, and we started going down. Next thing you know, about a mile down the turnpike, we saw this farm. And sure enough, there was a corn crib there, and it was filled with corn. We said, that's what we need right there. So the 4 wagons that we were guarding, with 16 of us, went down and we started loading up that corn crib. But not before my sergeant, Sergeant Holmes, deployed some of us out as a picket to make sure that this cavalry didn't approach us. We wanted to be ready just in case. So I was deployed down toward a thicket of cedar trees down there. And I just happened to get there right when I heard noise on the other side, and here was a detachment of about 100, at least a company of this regiment of cavalry, Reb Cavalry, the 6th Alabama, and I overheard them speaking, and they went to bragging with one another. And they said, them Yankee soldiers over there, we should go over there and we're going to capture them Yankee soldiers. They won't put up no fight because there's so many of us and so little of them. And so we're going to come and capture those boys and bring them back to our camp. Well, as soon as I heard that, I run as fast as I come back to the sergeant. I said, Sergeant, there's a whole bunch of Reb... I was going to say that, but guess what? I didn't have time to say it. Because as soon as I got back, that Reb Cavalry was starting to come through the gates and coming into the farmstead that we were loading up the corn on. And as soon as that happened, Sergeant Lavilla Holmes told everybody to take cover, take cover. Well, I took cover in the barn, in the bottom of the barn, and Sergeant Holmes and a couple other went up in the haylofts above me, and some dang fools, about 3 of us, went into the corn crib. Now, have you ever seen a corn crib with all those slats in the middle of it? You may feel like you're undercover, but there's a lot of holes between them slats, and some of our men got in there. Well, as soon as we got there, Sergeant Holmes says, now don't fire until you hear the signal shot. I'll take the first shot. Don't fire until I fire the first shot. So we all agreed to that. We're all taking cover, and here come that Reb Cavalry. 125 of them against 16 of us. And as they came through that gate, they spread out by the right and left flank, making a perfect line, and they started coming down at us, and then you heard the charge. Charge! They started yelling, these 6th Alabama Cavalry boys. They come charging down on us, and they said, surrender, you damn Yankees, surrender! And of course, we waited and waited and waited, and they was getting closer and getting closer and getting closer to us, and we thought, when is Sergeant Holmes going to fire? Because we were ordered not to fire until he fired. Finally, when they were about 3 or 4 rods away from us, Sergeant Holmes opened up with the other 2 men that were up in the hayloft, and that was the signal for all of us to open up. And we fired a withering volley into the oncoming cavalry. Right away, we hit the first horseman or 2, and the guy that was the leader, he had to be probably the leader of that particular group. His horse got shot out from underneath him and fell on top of him. He was pinned down for the whole rest of the fight. We shot about 8 horses right off the bat. The riders dismounted. That was enough to stop the whole charge. Those cavalrymen that survived it and that were not wounded, they rushed back to the fence and they started firing, dismounted, taking cover behind the fence. And we opened up on them, exchanging. I should have said it wasn't just bullets that were firing back and forth. There was a lot of expletives that were going back and forth, if you know what I mean. We were bad-mouthing them and they were bad-mouthing us, and we were shooting back and forth, and we were getting the best of them. They kept yelling for us to surrender, and we made so much noise that the 2nd Minnesota heard it, and they come over the hill. They knew we was in trouble, so they come over the hill, and as soon as the Alabama cavalry troopers, they saw this whole regiment coming over the hill, they skedaddled as fast as they could. So we ended up defending those wagons, and we also ended up, well, what happened? Our casualties, we took 3 casualties, and they were just wounds, flesh wounds. Sergeant Lavillo was shot in the hand. He was shot in the hip, excuse me. And the other 2 men were in the corn crib and got splinters in their hands. We also had a wagon tongue broken, and we had one of our mules shot dead. But you know what? We came out on top because they had 3 dead. We left behind 3 dead rebels there. We captured about 8, and we also got 10 horses. 10 of the horses were run off, and they come back to us again. And so we traded 10 horses for our 1 mule, which is a pretty good deal. At any rate, after that, I stayed in the Army, of course. My term of enlistment was for 3 years, and I fought after that at the Battle of Chickamauga and also Shelbyville. But it was Chickamauga that was very memorable too, because I received a pretty severe wound, and I had to drop out of the Army for a short time. I was anxious to get back to my comrades, and I was out until December. And in December, I rejoined the 2nd Minnesota, took part in the long campaign to capture Atlanta, and from there I participated in Sherman's March to the Sea. I was mustered out in June of 1865, and by that time I'd earned the rank of sergeant, which you see this old uniform me wearing right now. What happened after the war? I come back to Mankato, and we ran the store, and we basically turned the store into a restaurant. 4 years after the war, I met this pretty little thing by the name of Louise Perrier, and fell head over heels in love with her, and we were married 4 years after the war. We had 2 children. Some of the things I'll be remembered in Mankato for was, well, I was the quartermaster for many years of the Alexander Wilkin Post of the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. And also I was instrumental in building up the Mankato Fire Department to be a very professional organization. And I worked for them on a volunteer basis for 27 years. And so I'm very proud of that record as well. At any rate, that's my story. I guess I should share with you why I put this on. The medal did arrive. And of course, you need to understand, I wasn't the only one who won this one. 16 of us were awarded this Medal of Honor, but they could only find 8 of us. The rest of them either died or they could not be located. And so, I will just show you this magnificent medal. I'm very proud of that. But thank you all for listening.